Here we are with another round of the 70s versus the 90s. And this round we have Hal Ashby's Shampoo versus Warren Beatty's Bulworth. And this one was a hard one because these were both kind of fun. I had a really good time with them. Starting it off with Hal Ashby's Shampoo, which was co-written by Robert Towne and Warren Beatty. It was a story that Warren Beatty had been trying to do for a while. Originally, the script was based off of Jay Sebring, who was a famous hairstylist to the stars. And it is something that Warren Beatty had been kicking around for a while as this kind of way to play the sensitive Don Juan, as a, play. If he's playing the hairdresser, everybody thinks that he's homosexual and so he can fuck all these women, And in a way, kind of mirrors Warren Beatty's whole career. He was always the pretty boy actor, but he always, he fucked a lot of women. And so this was basically his way of getting to finally just be himself and be honest on the screen. And, with a great script by Robert Towne, the film basically, we find the character of George trying to, get his life together. He's got several women that he's been banging, and, that's all kind of imploding in on him. He's got a steady girlfriend, Goldie Hawn, that he's seeing, but he's also fucking around on her. The dude that he's trying to get a loan from, he's banging. Not only is he banging his wife, but he's also banging his mistress, and his daughter on top of that, So it's just all this shit blows up in his face. The film takes place, basically within the span of a day. And, it's Hal Ashby is a brilliant director of somebody that can really deal with controlled chaos. And that's why he was so good at doing Robert Towne scripts, as we saw last week with The Last Detail. But also nobody really knew Warren Beatty better than Robert Towne. Where the script was originally based on Jay Sebring, it took him so long to write the script that it just ended up becoming more and more about Warren Beatty than anything else. That final scene where he's just, talking about this, so what, I fuck him, it's just like, you really feel that, that's, this whole movie is just kind of the way for Warren Beatty just to finally show the world how, his acting chops by being himself, but you never play anything better than you play yourself. But the fact that nothing works out for this guy is just perfect. You can see all his bullshit just explode in his face, and it just fucking ends. It's honestly poetry. This is partly why the 70s were such a golden age of filmmaking, where you can just watch somebody fail and it be so utterly entertaining. The dialogue's crisp. It's some fucking funny scenarios. The thing about it is, Robert Towne can come up with every single contrivance you could think of, where it would take like 3 or 4 writers just to do that one script. So, mostly the success, it all comes together, because you got Warren Beatty trying to push his thing, Robert Towne just, making it and spinning all that shit into gold. Then Hal Ashby able to put it on the screen, because one thing Hal Ashby was good at was letting his actors ramble, just let the fucking performance just unload on the screen, and it's beautiful. Warren Beatty really bears his heart and soul to it, and he gets to finally really show that, because Julie Christie was always the woman he was most hung up on, and that's who he's most hung up on in the film. And it's just, and Jack Warden's great. There's really just, and another thing that Hal Ashby, is his use of music in the film. It's so subtle, but then you don't really realize it's there until halfway in the scene. Oh shit, but it's mood music. Everything is there for a purpose. There's nothing out of place here, and it lovely cinematography from Laszlo Kovacs. But then we move forward. One film about politics to another film about politics, and that's Bulworth. This time it's directed by Warren Beatty, who he co-wrote with. Let's see who the co-writer was. Somebody named Jeremy Pinsker. I don't know that cat, but I don't know his work. I don't know him. I don't know his work. But it ain't Robert Towne, and that's the thing is without Robert Towne, this movie's all concept and no delivery. Because the thing about Bulworth, the whole premise is he's a senator that puts a contract out on himself, but then decides, his whole antics are, really winning. So he's like trying to call off the hitman and shit, and there's great moments. Don't get me wrong. There's some funny, but it's all cheap laughs, because it's just basically Beatty, in his older age is talking about, in a way to be mad about how the 60s didn't work out, like he actually gave a fuck, type of shit, political, calling out all the shit. And, honestly, a film that, maybe a little ahead of its time, but, definitely something that, it can inspire ire and shit, and you can go along with it just because it's so fucking wild and crazy, but there's no real structure to it. I mean, Halle Berry is fucking amazingly hot in it. She's easily the best part of the movie. And, a lot of like the side characters, you're like Oliver Platt's great, Don Cheadle's great. But like the concept and just that ending of like he doesn't die, he doesn't like, oh, everything works out for him, and it's like you could just be a complete horse's ass. You could have did that without your little near death experience, and it honestly kind of feels like the kind of bullshit that Frank Capra would have peddled. We see this kind of consistently with a lot of these filmmaker actors that made their mark in the new Hollywood, like Dennis Hopper and Warren Beatty, and then they do the 90s, it's like they come to the 90s and decide, well, let's just make the shit that, we rebelled against in the 60s and 70s. So it's kind of irksome when you think about it, where you see something like Shampoo, it's so fuck you in your face, just unapologetically what it is, and the beauty of the George character in Shampoo is like he's all about the hair, like sure he likes fucking women, but you always see him, it's just all about the hair, that I have none. But Shampoo, man, it's so true to its characters, where it's like you got this Bulworth character is like all fucking, he's all radical now, but then, where was these radical politics? I guess money, it's always the easy way out, but if you really gave a fuck, you would have told the money people to go fuck yourself. It's all prestige. It's in a way kind of a metaphor for Warren Beatty's career, but where in Shampoo it was great, it kind of falls flat in Bulworth, Grant, like I said, it goes for the cheap laughs and it's great. But, in the 90s, Robert Towne was doing more writing for Tom Cruise than he was for Warren Beatty. So, and those movies sucked too. So I guess by the 90s, these cats had lost their touch. And so I guess I'm just going to have to give it to Shampoo on this one, which ties it up for anybody keeping score out there besides myself. That's the 70s and 90s tied up 4-4. So, because here's the thing. Like, this one was a hard one. I almost gave it to Bulworth, but that ending fucking sucks. Had they actually killed him, that would have been great. But the fucking, I don't want to give who shoots him, but it would have been poetic justice if he actually would have died. But it ends on some fucking bleak, ambiguous bullshit where he's not going to die. He's just going to continue to do mid work. Maybe he ends up fucking, the whole romance thing too. It's like, why in the fuck would somebody as great as Halle Berry be buying into this kind of fucking bullshit, especially the character that she plays, it's just so not true to the characters, it's just such a cop-out bullshit, old man romanticism is just fucking garbage, so that's why Shampoo gets it, because, fuck, those fucking fuck you, nobody wins, bleak, ambiguous endings, when they're done right, man, it can be fucking beautiful. But when you only want to half-ass it, it's fucking bullshit, which is what Bulworth is. Should have just been called bullshit. Shampoo wins this round. You get two different instances where, Warren Beatty's trying to channel himself. He should have just stayed with Shampoo. There's really nothing more he could say about that decade or anything else, because, even though the 90s and 70s part two, people gave even less of a shit than they did in the 70s. So they're tied up now. 70s and 90s, 4-4. Next week is going to be a hell of a tiebreaker, because there we have Chinatown versus LA Confidential. So that's going to be even harder than this one. This one was a true wild card. And, I don't really think I have much even further to say about it. It's just one of those things. The more you think about it, the ones that really went out are the fresh blood. Some people should, kind of backs up Tarantino's argument of, maybe motherfuckers should just stop making films at a certain point, and let the young guys go out of the way and also Hal Ashby was a fucking boss. Nobody could really make a fucking film. Hal Ashby was kind of like a Robert Altman you could control in a certain way. Whereas like Robert Altman, you couldn't cage that guy. You could cage Hal Ashby, get him to do whatever the fuck you wanted to do, but he'd get you the film you knew you wanted. And that's what happens with Shampoo. Beatty, almost a shittier director than he is an actor, and he proves it with Bulworth. So they're tied up 4-4. Let's see who breaks it next week. As I said, if I've said anything wrong, something you don't agree with, eviscerate me in the comments. I don't give a shit if you got any recommendations for matchups. I'd love to hear them. I got plenty lined up. This is probably going to go on for who the fuck knows how long. But all I know is next week is Chinatown versus LA Confidential, so stay tuned for that.